I need to be honest with you, Maya. This isn't working anymore. The words hung in the air of our modest apartment living room like toxic smoke. My husband of 3 years, Ethan, stood by the window, his silhouette outlined against the fading sunset over Seattle's skyline. I instinctively placed my hand on my swollen belly, feeling our son kick beneath my palm. 5 months pregnant, and my college sweetheart was telling me he wanted out. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. I've thought about little else, Ethan, I replied, keeping my voice steady despite the tornado of emotions inside me. From my position on our second-hand sofa, the one we'd found at that estate sale in Fremont, and spent a weekend reupholstering together. I watched him pace before the window. Rain began to patter against the glass, mirroring the tears I refused to let fall. Then you understand my position, he continued, still not meeting my eyes. We've grown apart, Maya. These things happen. These things happen. As if abandoning your pregnant wife was as casual as missing a dinner reservation. Behind Ethan, the Seattle skyline blurred through rain-streaked windows. I'd once found that view hopeful, a symbol of all we could achieve together in this city. Now it just looked cold and indifferent, much like my husband's expression. And the timing? I asked, unable to keep the edge from my voice. You couldn't wait until after our son is born? Ethan sighed dramatically, the sound I'd come to recognize as his prelude to condescension. The timing is unfortunate, I admit, but dragging this out won't make it easier. He finally turned to face me, his expression a practiced mask of regret. Jasper says a clean break is best. Ah yes, Jasper Collins, the smooth-talking startup lawyer who'd been calling our apartment for weeks. The same Jasper whose craft beers had been appearing in our refrigerator. The same Jasper whose cologne I'd detected on Ethan's jacket last month when he came home late from yet another networking event. I took a slow, centering breath. And what does Jasper suggest about custody arrangements? The subtle flinch confirmed my suspicions before he could compose himself. I don't know what you're implying, but Jasper is merely providing professional services. Professional services, I echoed. Is that what they call it now? Of course, I replied, the picture of calm acceptance. And these professional services, do they include a parenting plan for our son? Or is that an additional fee? Ethan's jaw tightened. Don't be difficult, Maya. I've already been more than generous in my initial offer. He set his artisanal IPA down with a sharp clink against our coffee table, the table I'd built in my workshop during my second trimester when nesting energy hit me hard. The apartment lease will be transferred to you, assets divided equally. You'll receive appropriate child support, naturally. Appropriate, generous. His careful language spoke volumes about what he wasn't saying, that he planned to give me the bare minimum he could get away with. I wondered if he remembered that day 3 years ago, standing in matching flannel at the courthouse, vowing forever before our friends and my sister as witnesses. I wondered if he remembered the tears in his eyes when I'd shown him the positive pregnancy test. I wondered when those things had become inconvenient obstacles to his happiness rather than his happiness itself. I see, I said, rising slowly from the couch, one hand supporting my lower back. Pregnancy had made such simple movements increasingly difficult. And when should I expect formal papers? Jasper is preparing everything, Ethan replied, relief evident in his voice. He'd expected hysterics, perhaps, or begging. They should be ready by the end of the week. I nodded and moved toward our bedroom, soon to be just my bedroom, I supposed. Maya, he called after me, an unusual hesitation in his voice. I hope we can keep this civil for everyone's sake. I paused in the doorway, not turning around. Civil is my middle name, Ethan. What Ethan didn't know, what he had never bothered to discover in our years together, was that civility was indeed my specialty. As the overlooked middle daughter of William Chen, I'd learned early that quiet observation revealed more than brash confrontation. While my sisters fought for our father's attention, I'd watched and learned how he built his furniture business from nothing. Inside our bedroom, I closed the door softly behind me. No dramatics, no slamming. Ethan would interpret my calm as defeat, as acceptance. Men like him always mistook composure for weakness. My phone buzzed with a text from my father. "Everything okay, little dragon? Workshop meeting tomorrow at 9? Still coming?" I smiled faintly at the screen. At 68, Dad still ran Chen Bespoke Furniture with meticulous precision, even with his semi-retirement. He kept tabs on every aspect of the business, from raw lumber selection to final polish. "I'll be there," I texted back. "And Dad, I'll need some time with you afterward. Private matter." His response came immediately. "My door's always open for you, Maya." Setting my phone aside, I moved to the closet and slid aside the loose floorboard in the back corner, a quirk of our old apartment that Ethan had never noticed when we moved in. Inside the small space was a slim leather portfolio. I extracted it and returned to sit on the edge of our queen-sized bed. The portfolio contained a single document bound with a simple black clip. I ran my fingers over the embossed logo in the corner, Ramirez and Associates, attorneys at law. 3 years ago, 2 weeks before our courthouse wedding, I sat in Elena Ramirez's office on my father's recommendation. "A prenuptial agreement is simply prudent planning, Ms. Chen," the elder lawyer had explained, "especially given your family's business and your own growing workshop." "Ethan would see it as a sign of distrust," I'd replied. "He's made it clear. He finds prenups insulting." Elena had leaned forward, her eyes kind but serious behind wire-rimmed glasses. "Then perhaps we should discuss an alternative arrangement, something that provides protection without confrontation." That alternative lay in my hands now, a postnuptial agreement, prepared but never presented to Ethan, with a unique provision that would activate automatically under specific circumstances. Ethan's signature was already on it, hidden within the stack of renewal documents for our apartment lease that I managed each year. The provision was simple. In the event that Ethan initiated divorce proceedings while I was pregnant or within 1 year of childbirth, a significant restructuring of our financial arrangements would trigger. Instead of the standard equal division he expected under Washington state law, he would retain only what he had brought into the marriage, a considerably smaller amount than what we now controlled together. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. My father had called it an integrity clause. Elena Ramirez had called it innovative but entirely enforceable. I had called it insurance I never expected to need. Yet here I was, 5 months pregnant with divorce papers imminent. I returned the document to its hiding place and changed into my nightgown. Tomorrow would require careful timing and perfect composure. Fortunately, those were qualities I'd cultivated my entire life. As I settled into bed, I heard Ethan's phone ring in the living room, followed by his hushed voice. Jasper, no doubt, finalizing details of what he thought would be a straightforward dissolution of our marriage. I closed my eyes, feeling my son shift inside me. "Don't worry, little one," I whispered, stroking my belly. "Mommy has a plan." The Chen Bespoke Furniture Workshop occupied an unassuming brick building in Seattle's industrial district. I'd spent every summer here during high school and college, learning the business from the ground up before starting my own custom design line. As I pulled my compact SUV into the familiar gravel parking lot, the scent of sawdust and varnish greeted me like an old friend. Inside, the rhythmic sounds of sanding, hammering, and the occasional whir of power tools created a comforting symphony. Dad's employees, many who had worked for him for decades, nodded respectfully as I passed. A few glanced at my pregnant belly with warm smiles tinged with curiosity. "Maya, you're positively glowing," said Lynn, my father's office manager of 30 years. Her sharp eyes assessed me quickly. But you look tired. Is everything all right? Just pregnancy insomnia, I replied with a reassuring smile. Go right in. The quarterly design team just wrapped up. Lynn's gaze lingered on me, and I knew she suspected there was more to my visit than routine business. My father stood as I entered his office, coming around his workbench to embrace me. William Chen had the bearing of a man half his age, his salt and pepper hair the only concession to time's passage. There's my little dragon, he said warmly, helping me to one of the handcrafted chairs positioned before his desk. How's my grandson? Treating you? He's practicing his kickboxing skills on my bladder, I replied, settling into the chair. But otherwise, we're managing. Dad returned to his seat, studying me with the same penetrating gaze that had intimidated countless business competitors. Now, what's this private matter you mentioned? And where's Ethan? I expected him to accompany you to the doctor appointments. By now. I took a deep breath. Ethan asked for a divorce last night. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. My father's expression didn't change, but his knuckles whitened where they rested on his desk. I see, he said finally, his voice deceptively soft. And his reasoning for this impeccably timed decision? The usual clichés, growing apart, wanting different things. I kept my tone neutral, factual. His lawyer is preparing papers as we speak? Jasper Collins, Dad stated rather than asked. At my surprised look, he shrugged. I make it my business to know who represents potential adversaries. He has a reputation for being ruthless, especially with startups and tech divorces. That won't be an issue, I replied, allowing myself a small smile. Since we don't have a prenup, my father's eyebrow arched. I distinctly recall suggesting otherwise before your wedding. You suggested I protect myself, I corrected him. And I did. Just not in the way Ethan would have expected. Understanding dawned on his face, followed by something that looked almost like pride. The document Elena Ramirez prepared? I nodded. Ethan signed it 3 years ago without realizing what it was. The pregnancy contingency will activate the moment he files. Dad leaned back in his chair, a hint of a smile playing around his mouth. And he has no idea. None, I confirmed. He expects a standard divorce, equal division of assets, minimal child support, and a clean break with his reputation, intact for his precious startup career. But instead, he'll learn that while he was building his social network and chasing venture capital, I was quietly developing my custom furniture line through Chen subsidiaries. The workspace he thinks we lease jointly, purchased through my holding company. The investment in his friend's brewery? Same arrangement. My father nodded slowly. And you need what from me exactly? 2 things, I said, straightening in my chair. First, I need access to the private investigator you used during the Northgate property acquisition. Ethan believes his relationship with Jasper is well hidden, but I need documentation. Not for the divorce, Washington is no fault, but for afterward. And second, I need to accelerate my return to Chen Bespoke. The head designer position has been vacant since Michael retired. I want it. Dad studied me for a long moment. When Ethan and I had married, I'd stepped back from my executive track at Chen Bespoke to support his startup dreams. It had seemed romantic at the time, the supportive wife behind the ambitious entrepreneur. Now, the naivety of that decision stung like sawdust in an open cut. The board would need to approve the appointment, Dad said finally. But as it happens, I'd already planned to propose your name at next month's meeting. Your sustainable materials initiative impressed everyone. Even doing it part-time, relief washed through me. The Sustainable Materials Initiative had been my pet project for the past year. A series of carefully structured relationships with local suppliers that had yielded both ecological benefits and cost savings. I'd managed it quietly, without Ethan's Knowledge or involvement, presenting my work directly to the board each quarter. Michael's position is yours if you want it, Dad continued, though the timing may raise eyebrows given your condition. I placed both hands on my belly. This baby is precisely why I need to secure my position now. Ethan doesn't expect me to fight back. He thinks pregnancy makes me vulnerable, that I'll accept whatever terms he offers just to avoid stress. Dad's expression darkened. He never deserved you, Maya. Perhaps not, I acknowledged. But he gave me one good thing. I rubbed my belly gently. And he's worth all of this. My father reached across the desk and squeezed my hand. What's your timeline? Jasper will serve papers by week's weekend. The post-nuptial will activate immediately. I'll need the investigator's findings before our first court appearance, which Jasper will schedule as soon as possible. He prefers to overwhelm opponents with rapid proceedings. Consider it done. Dad made a brief note on his tablet. Lynn will connect you with Russo Investigations this afternoon. On the company matter, I'll call an emergency board session for tomorrow. Given your track record with the sustainable materials initiative, I anticipate no objections to your appointment. I rose from my chair, feeling lighter than I had in weeks. Thank you, Dad. No thanks needed, he replied, coming around to embrace me again. Your Chen, Maya. We take care of our own. He pulled back, his eyes fierce with protection. And whatever that fool husband of yours has planned, he's about to learn what that really means. As I left my father's office, my phone buzzed with a text from Ethan. Meeting with Jasper running long. Don't wait up, we can discuss details tomorrow. I slipped the phone back into my purse without replying. Let him think I was at home crying. Into my pregnancy tea. By tomorrow, the landscape of our divorce would look dramatically different than anything he and Jasper had planned. In the elevator down to the workshop floor, I pulled out my phone again and opened my banking app. With a few quick taps, I transferred a significant sum from our joint account into my private one. Nothing that could be construed as hiding assets, just enough to ensure comfort while the legal process unfolded. As I stepped out into the bright, spring sunshine, I felt my son kick decisively, as if offering his own vote of confidence. That's right, little one, I murmured, heading toward my car. We're done being underestimated. The following day passed in a blur of activity while Ethan remained conspicuously absent, staying at what I assumed was Jasper's downtown loft, though he didn't know I was aware of that detail. I met with Russo Investigations, finalized my appointment to Chen Bespoke's executive team, and prepared for the inevitable confrontation. By evening, I had settled comfortably in our apartment living room with a cup of herbal tea when I heard Ethan's key in the door. Game time. He entered looking rumpled and tired, his designer jeans slightly creased, his startup hoodie wrinkled. The sight of me calmly reading on the sofa seemed to throw him momentarily. Maya, he said, quickly recovering his composure. I didn't expect you to be up. Waiting for my husband to come home seems reasonable, I replied mildly, setting my book aside. Especially when we have important matters to discuss. Ethan loosened his scarf, avoiding my gaze. About that. Jasper has prepared the initial filing. He suggests we meet together tomorrow to review terms before submitting to the court, for simplicity's sake. Simplicity, I echoed. Yes, that. Would be preferable. Something in my tone made him glance up sharply. You seem calm, he observed. Did you expect histrionics? Begging? Tearful appeals to our vows? I sipped my tea. That's not my style, Ethan. You know that. Relief flickered across his face. Then you understand this is for the best. A clean break, fair division, and we can both move forward. I understand perfectly, I assured him, though I should mention I've engaged my own counsel to review the papers. Standard procedure, I'm sure Jasper would agree. Ethan's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. That's unnecessary. The terms are extremely generous. Nevertheless, I replied, rising from the sofa with deliberate grace, one hand supporting my belly. Elena Ramirez will be joining us at tomorrow's meeting. Ramirez? Ethan's voice rose slightly. From your father's firm? Maya, this doesn't need to become contentious. I paused on my way to the bedroom. Nothing contentious about proper legal representation, Ethan. I thought you of all people would appreciate due diligence. I offered him a serene smile. Jasper's office at 2? Correct, he replied stiffly. We'll be there. Before he could respond. Further, I closed the bedroom door behind me, leaving him standing in the living room, the first seedlings of doubt visibly taking root. In my bedroom, soon to be just mine, I changed into my nightgown and settled onto the bed with my laptop. A new email from Russo Investigations contained preliminary findings, date-stamped photos of Ethan entering Jasper's building late at night, receipts from romantic dinners charged to his fledgling company's card, and hotel reservations made under his assistant's name but signed for by him. A thorough documentation of betrayal, all compiled in less than 24 hours. My father's resources were nothing if not efficient. Another email notification appeared, this one from the board secretary confirming my appointment as head designer at Chen Bespoke Furniture, effective immediately. Attached was a press release scheduled for distribution tomorrow afternoon. Perfect. Timing! I closed my laptop and turned off the light, listening to Ethan moving around in the living room down the hall. Tomorrow, Jasper Collins would expect to face a distraught pregnant woman desperate to preserve her marriage. Instead, he would meet the newly appointed lead designer of one of Seattle's most respected furniture companies, backed by Elena Ramirez, whose reputation for ruthless efficiency rivaled Jasper's own. And Ethan would discover that underestimating Maya Chen had been the most expensive mistake of his life. As I drifted toward sleep, my son kicked energetically, as if sensing the coming storm. That's right, I whispered into the darkness. Tomorrow, we will show them what we're made of. Jasper Collins's law office occupied the 10th floor of a gleaming tower in the South Lake Union Tech District, its reception area decorated in minimalist shades of gray and white, intentionally intimidating, I thought, as the receptionist led me past glass-walled conference rooms toward the corner office. I'd arrived precisely 15 minutes early, not enough to seem anxious but sufficient to settle myself before Ethan and Jasper began their performance. Elena Ramirez walked beside me, her silver hair and impeccable navy suit projecting exactly the gravitas I needed. Remember, Elena murmured as we approached Jasper's office, let them present their terms completely before we introduce the post-nuptial. Maximum effect. I nodded, adjusting the tailored maternity blazer I'd selected for today. Chen furniture jade green, structured shoulders, subtle wooden buttons hand-carved from reclaimed maple. Battle armor in its way. Jasper's assistant opened the door with a practiced smile. Mr. Collins is ready for you. Mr. Chen hasn't arrived yet. Of course not. Ethan's preferred power move, letting others wait. Jasper rose from behind his glass desk as we entered, his slim-fit suit a stark contrast to the monochromatic office. His smile remained fixed as he registered Elena's presence. Ms. Chen, he greeted me, extending his hand. And Ms. Ramirez, I wasn't aware you'd be joining us. Last-minute addition, Elena replied smoothly, her handshake firm. Ms. Chen felt proper representation was prudent. Jasper's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. Of course, though this is really just a preliminary discussion of terms. Nothing formal yet. Even preliminary terms benefit from professional review, I said, lowering myself carefully into one of the sleek chairs before his desk. At 5 months, pregnant, such simple movements required increasing concentration. Jasper resumed his seat, dark eyes assessing me with newfound caution. Ethan had undoubtedly described me as compliant, perhaps even naive. Elena Ramirez's presence had already disrupted that narrative. Ethan mentioned you're expecting a boy, Jasper said, his tone softening into practiced sympathy. Congratulations. These circumstances must be especially difficult. Thank you for your concern, I replied, matching his professional courtesy, though I find that difficulty often reveals opportunity. Before he could respond, the door opened again, and Ethan strode in. He faltered slightly upon seeing me already seated with Elena, then quickly recovered, straightening his startup-branded pullover. Sorry I'm late. Investor call ran long. His standard excuse, delivered with practiced casualness. Elena, good to see you, he added without warmth. Elena nodded without rising. Jasper gestured Ethan to the seat beside him, creating a visual alignment I was certain was intentional. Us versus them, the battle lines drawn. Shall we begin? Jasper opened a sleek leather portfolio. I've prepared a standard dissolution agreement based on Ethan's instructions. Equal division of marital assets, joint custody with primary physical custody to Maya until the child is 3, at which point we'd revisit the arrangement. Child support calculated per state guidelines. He slid a document across to me. The financial disclosure lists all known assets. Ethan has been very forthcoming. I accepted the paperwork without looking at it, passing it directly to Elena. Her eyes flickered over the first page, then the second, a slight twitch at the corner of her mouth, the only indication of her reaction. And the apartment lease? Elena asked, her tone deceptively mild. To be transferred to Maya, Jasper replied immediately. Ethan understands she'll need appropriate housing for herself and the baby. Generous, Elena murmured, continuing to scan the document. Ethan shifted in his seat, clearly uncomfortable with Elena's presence. Good. Discomfort led to mistakes. As you can see, Jasper continued, we're proposing a very fair settlement. Ethan values an amicable resolution. I smiled politely. Amicable is certainly preferable. Ethan relaxed slightly, interpreting my calm as acquiescence. Jasper, more perceptive, studied me with narrowed eyes. Before we proceed further, Elena interjected, setting aside Jasper's document, we should address the existing agreement. Ethan frowned. What existing agreement? Elena withdrew a slim folder from her briefcase and placed it on the desk. The post-nuptial agreement executed by both parties 3 years ago. The color drained from Ethan's face. That's impossible. We never signed a postnup. On the contrary, Elena opened the folder and turned it toward them. Your signature appears on page 12, dated October 15th, 3 years ago, and again on the annual renewal each subsequent year. Jasper snatched the document, scanning it rapidly, his professional composure cracking. This is irregular. When was this supposedly presented to my client? It was included in the annual apartment lease renewal documentation, I explained, watching Ethan's growing confusion. The same packet you sign every year without reading, Ethan. Page 12, right after the utilities disclosure. Recognition dawned in his eyes, followed quickly by anger. That's entrapment. You buried it intentionally. It was clearly marked, Elena countered calmly, and executed with proper notarization. Washington courts have upheld similar agreements, provided they meet basic standards of disclosure, which this does. Jasper was scanning the document furiously now, flipping pages with increasing agitation. When he reached a particular section, he stopped abruptly, his expression hardening. This contains a pregnancy contingency clause, he said, voice tight with controlled rage. Indeed, Elena confirmed. Activated specifically under the current circumstances. Initiation of divorce. Proceedings during pregnancy. Ethan grabbed the document from Jasper. What the hell does that mean? What contingency? It means, I said, speaking directly to him for the first time, that in the event you chose to divorce me while I was carrying your child, certain financial protections activate automatically. Protections? Jasper repeated flatly. Let me be specific, shall we? Elena replied. This clause essentially reverts all marital assets to their original owner, minus specific contributions to joint ventures. She looked up, eyes cold. It's punitive. It's insurance, I corrected her, against exactly this scenario. Ethan was still reading, his face growing increasingly pale. This can't be enforceable. I never agreed to this. Your signature indicates otherwise, Elena replied, as does the annual renewal, which you've signed 3 times now. You tricked me, Ethan accused, looking at me with genuine shock, as if he were the betrayed party. You knew I never read those lease papers. A failure of due diligence on your part, I observed calmly, hardly constitutes fraud. Jasper placed a restraining hand on Ethan's arm as he started to rise. Let's remain professional, he cautioned, then turned to Elena. This document requires careful review. We'll need time to consult with additional counsel. Of course, Elena agreed pleasantly, though you should know the pregnancy clause includes a time-sensitive element. Assets transferred after service of divorce papers may be subject to recovery action. Ethan paled further. The $50,000 he'd moved to his private account yesterday, a transfer Russo investigations had documented immediately, would now be problematic. This is ridiculous, he snapped. I'm not going to be blackmailed into staying in a failed marriage. No one's asking you to stay, I replied softly. The agreement simply ensures our child and I are properly provided for, given the timing of your decision. Jasper was rapidly making notes. We need to calculate exactly what this means financially. Ethan, what assets did you bring into the marriage independently? Ethan ran a hand through his carefully styled hair, visibly rattled. My tech stock, portfolio, maybe $80,000 then. Savings of about $25,000. Elena slid another document across the table. For convenience, we've prepared a summary of premarital versus marital assets. As you'll see, the current marital estate is valued at approximately $1.2 million, of which roughly $950,000 would revert to Maya under the agreement. The silence that followed was absolute. Ethan stared at the figures, disbelief etched on his face. This is absurd, Jasper finally declared. Ethan earned the majority of this money through his position at Tech Fusion and his startup consultancy. Actually, I interjected, the growth came primarily through investment vehicles I established through Chen subsidiaries. Ethan's consultancy, income, while substantial, accounts for less than 30% of our asset accumulation. You never told me you were investing through your father's company, Ethan accused. You never asked, I replied simply. The quarterly reports detailed every investment clearly. Again, your failure to review them isn't my responsibility. Jasper's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, then did a double take, his composed facade cracking. Momentarily. Problem? Elena inquired politely. He recovered quickly. Nothing relevant to our discussion. But the slight tremor in his hand suggested otherwise. My own phone vibrated in my pocket. A quick glance confirmed what I already knew. The Chen Bespoke press release had just gone live, announcing my appointment as head designer. Judging by Jasper's reaction, he'd just received the same news. Ethan, oblivious to this development, was still fixated on the financial summary. This can't be right. The apartment is in both our names. The leasing company, that holds the master lease, is in both your names, Elena corrected. The company itself is owned 90% by Maya's family trust. Your contribution was the security deposit, which you'll notice is credited to you here. She tapped a line item on the summary. Ethan looked at me, truly seeing me perhaps for the first time in our marriage. You planned this all along. I protected myself, I corrected him. There's a difference. Regardless, Jasper interjected, gathering his composure, we'll need to thoroughly review these documents before proceeding. I suggest we adjourn and reconvene next week. Elena closed her portfolio. Certainly, though be advised we've already filed notice with the court regarding the postnuptial agreement. Any assets moved after today will trigger automatic review. Ethan's expression confirmed he'd been planning exactly that. As we prepared to leave, Jasper's assistant appeared at the door. "Mr. Collins, I have Ms. Winters from the Tech Chronicle on line 2. She's asking about the Chen Bespoke announcement and its impact on the Chen-Tate divorce." Jasper's eyes snapped to me. "What announcement?" I rose carefully from my chair, one hand supporting my lower back. "My appointment as head designer at Chen Bespoke Furniture, effective immediately." "You're returning to work now?" Ethan's disbelief was almost comical. "You're 5 months pregnant." "Pregnancy doesn't diminish my professional capabilities," I replied calmly. "Though I appreciate your sudden concern for my condition." Jasper's expression had turned calculating. "The timing is interesting." "Merely coincidental," Elena interjected, smoothly. "The board vote was scheduled weeks ago. A patent lie, but impossible to disprove." "If there's nothing else?" I asked, gathering my purse. Ethan stood abruptly. "This isn't over, Maya." "On the contrary," I replied, meeting his gaze steadily. "It's proceeding exactly as outlined in the agreement you signed. Elena will coordinate with Jasper on next steps." As Elena and I walked toward the elevator, I felt Ethan's stare burning into my back. The first round had gone decisively in my favor, but I harbored no illusions that he would concede easily. Men like Ethan, accustomed to controlling the narrative, rarely surrendered without a fight. Once in the privacy of the elevator, Elena allowed herself a small smile. "That went rather well," she observed, "though Jasper Collins is formidable." "He'll seek every possible angle to challenge the agreement," I replied. "Let him," I said, feeling my son shift restlessly inside me. We anticipated every argument when we drafted it. Nevertheless, prepare for aggressive tactics. They'll likely request an emergency hearing to freeze assets pending review of the post-nup. I nodded, already anticipating our countermoves. Dad's publicity team is standing by if they attempt character assassination, and Russo's report on Ethan's extracurricular activities with Jasper should provide useful leverage. The elevator reached the lobby, its doors opening to reveal a small cluster of reporters already gathered near the entrance. News traveled fast in tech circles. "Ms. Chen," called one, surging forward, "can you comment on your appointment at Chen Bespoke during your divorce proceedings? Is it true your husband's affair with his lawyer began before your pregnancy?" Elena stepped slightly in front of me, her expression stern. "Ms. Chen has no comment at this time. Any questions should be directed to Chen Bespoke's Media Relations Office." She guided me efficiently through the crowd to the waiting car, where Jorge, my father's longtime driver, held the door open. "Your father sends his congratulations," Jorge said as he closed the door behind us both. "On the appointment and on showing that weasel what a Chen is made of." I smiled despite myself. "Thank you, Jorge. Home, please." As the car pulled away from the curb, I watched the reporters turn their attention to the building entrance, where Ethan and Jasper had just emerged. Their expressions, Ethan's thunderous, Jasper's carefully blank, told me everything I needed to know about their post-meeting discussion. "Round 2 begins tomorrow," Elena observed, following my gaze. "They'll file for an emergency review first thing in the morning." "And we'll be ready," I assured her, turning away from the window. "Has Sophia prepared the forensic accounting report?" "Delivered this morning. Ethan's financial maneuvers over the past month are extensively documented. The transfers to his private account, the liquidated stock options, even the cryptocurrency wallet he opened last week." The cryptocurrency wallet was new information. Contents unknown, but the timing was suspicious. Established the day after he consulted Jasper for the first time. I made a mental note to have Russo investigate further. Ethan wasn't particularly creative, but desperation might make him unpredictable. "What's our next vulnerability?" I asked, mentally reviewing our strategy. Elena considered for a moment. "Your pregnancy itself. They may suggest the stress of litigation poses a risk to your health. Attempt to delay proceedings until after delivery, when the special provisions would no longer apply. Dr. Winters has already confirmed my excellent health, I replied, and I've been documenting my vital signs and stress levels daily since Ethan first mentioned divorce. If necessary, we can demonstrate that uncertainty would cause more stress than resolution. Elena nodded approvingly. You've thought of everything. Not everything, I reflected silently. I hadn't anticipated how it would feel to watch the man I had loved, the father of my child, look at me with such naked calculation. Despite everything, some foolish part of me had hoped Ethan might show a flicker of regret, perhaps even guilt. Instead, I'd seen only thwarted entitlement and anger. The apartment will need additional security tonight, Elena said, interrupting my thoughts. Ethan may attempt to remove items of value. Already arranged, I assured her. The building management has been instructed not to allow removal of art or furniture without dual authorization. As we approached my apartment building, I saw a familiar figure pacing outside. My younger sister, Lily, clutching 2 takeout bags from my favorite Vietnamese restaurant. Reinforcements, I murmured as Jorge pulled to the curb. Lily rushed forward as I emerged from the car. At 29, 3 years my junior, she had inherited our mother's dramatic flair along with her artistic talent. Tell me everything, she demanded, linking her arm through mine as we entered the building. Dad's being maddeningly vague, just saying you handled it beautifully. What happened? Did he cry? Did that shark lawyer turn green when Elena showed up? Let me get inside first, I suggested, nodding to Elena as she departed with promises. To call with any developments. I need to change out of these heels before my ankles stage a complete rebellion. Upstairs, I quickly changed into loose loungewear, while Lily arranged our dinner on the living room coffee table, the one I'd crafted from reclaimed cedar during our first year of marriage. Contraband picho for me, lemongrass chicken and vegetables. For you, she said, settling cross-legged on the floor across from me. Spill every detail. I recounted the meeting as we ate, describing Jasper's composure, Ethan's shock, and the precise moment the balance of power had shifted. God, what I wouldn't give to have seen his face, Lily said, twirling noodles with her chopsticks. The great Ethan Tate, master of the tech universe, realizing his pregnant wife outmaneuvered him. It's not a victory yet, I cautioned her. Just the opening move. Lily snorted inelegantly. Please, Ethan never stood a chance against you, even before you went full Chen on him. Her expression softened. But are you okay? Really? The simple question nearly undid me. Since Ethan's announcement, I'd operated in strategic mode, planning, executing, advancing. I hadn't allowed myself to fully process the emotional reality of my marriage's collapse. I'm angry, I admitted quietly, not just about the affair, or the divorce, but that he thought so little of me. 4 years together, and he never bothered to really see me, just the convenient version he constructed in his mind. Lily reached across to squeeze my hand. His loss. Monumentally. Catastrophically. His loss. I know, I agreed, feeling my son shift inside me. And honestly, I'm relieved in a way. Better to raise him without the pretense of a partnership that never really existed. My phone buzzed with an incoming email. Lily peered over my shoulder. As I opened it, Holy, she breathed. Is that Ethan's boyfriend list? Jasper's just the most recent, I confirmed, scanning Russo's latest report dating back 18 months. Lily let out a low whistle. Multiple affairs, then? Does that change anything? Legally? No. Washington is no fault, I replied, scrolling through the report. But it confirms what I suspected. His dissatisfaction wasn't sudden. The report contained meticulously documented evidence, hotel receipts, restaurant charges, photographed timestamps. Ethan had been unfaithful almost from the beginning. It seemed his interest waning mere months after our wedding. A sudden wave of exhaustion washed over me. The day's victories, while satisfying, had extracted their toll. Lily, ever perceptive, began gathering our dinner remnants. "You need rest, big sister. You're growing an entire human in there." "Stay tonight?" I asked, surprising myself with the request. I'd prided myself on handling this situation independently, but suddenly the thought of being alone in the apartment felt overwhelming. "Already planned on it," Lily replied, holding up an overnight bag I hadn't noticed by the door. "Dad's orders, though I would have anyway." As she helped me up from the couch, my phone buzzed again. A text from Ethan. "We need to talk privately. No lawyers." Lily read the message over my shoulder and scoffed. Translation: "I need to try manipulating you without witnesses present." "Exactly. My thought," I agreed, setting the phone aside without replying. Whatever Ethan wanted to discuss could wait until morning. Tonight was for rest and regrouping. Tomorrow would bring the next phase of battle, and I needed all my strength for what lay ahead. Because if today's meeting had confirmed anything, it was that Ethan, faced with the prospect of losing both status and money, would stop at nothing to regain control. But then, neither would I. Morning arrived with the insistent buzz of my phone. 3 missed calls from Ethan, 5 text messages, and an email from Elena Ramirez marked urgent. I scrolled through Ethan's texts first. "We need to talk before this gets out." "Of hand. Maya, be reasonable. Let's discuss this like adults. You're making a mistake. I know things about your father's business you don't. Call me. Last chance to handle this privately." "Fine. Have it your way." The progression from cajoling to threatening was predictably Ethan. I forwarded the messages to Elena, then opened her email. As expected, Ethan and Jasper had filed an emergency motion challenging the post-nuptial agreement, claiming fraud and coercion. A hearing was scheduled for 2 p.m. Coercion, I murmured to myself, one hand resting on my active baby bump. "That's rich." "What's rich?" Lily asked sleepily from the doorway of the guest room, her black hair tousled from sleep. "Ethan's legal strategy." I showed her the email. Apparently, his pregnant wife tricked and coerced him into signing a legal document he couldn't be bothered to read. Lily snorted, padding toward the kitchen. "Bold strategy. How's the judge going to feel about a so-called tech genius claiming he signed documents without reading them?" "Exactly," I agreed, following her. "Coffee in the left cabinet. Decaf for me." "Disgusting," she commented, but dutifully prepared 2 cups. "What's the plan for today?" "Emergency hearing at 2. Before that, I have a meeting at Chen Bespoke. To finalize my transition, the Sustainable Materials Initiative needs attention." Lily handed me a steaming mug of decaf. "You're seriously going to work today? Hours before facing your soon-to-be ex in court?" "Business continues," I replied simply. "Besides, staying busy keeps me focused." My phone rang. This time my father. "Morning, Dad." "Russo sent over his final report," he said without preamble. "You'll want to see this immediately." I forwarded it to your secure email. "That sounds serious. Let's just say Ethan's been using company resources at Tech Fusion for more than client meetings. I've already alerted Elena." After ending the call, I opened the secure email application on my tablet. The attached report from Russo contained financial records from Tech Fusion showing Ethan had been charging personal expenses, including hotels and gifts for his various paramours, to client accounts, then obscuring the entries through creative accounting. Not just adultery, but fraud. "This changes things," I told Lily, who was reading over my shoulder with widening eyes. "Holy hell," she breathed. "He's been embezzling?" "Not technically," I clarified. "He's the VP of Client Relations. He has discretion over entertainment expenses, but charging escort services to the Martinez account crosses several lines, both ethical and potentially legal." I forwarded the report to Elena with instructions to prepare it for potential submission to the court, then headed to shower and dress. Bye. 8:30. I was in the back of my father's town car en route to Chen Bespoke, dressed in a charcoal maternity suit with subtle wooden accessories, my battle armor for the day ahead. Jorge navigated morning traffic with practiced ease. Your father asked me to remain at your disposal today, Ms. Chen. Wherever you need to go, whenever you need to leave. Thank you, Jorge. I caught his concerned glance in the rearview mirror. I'll be fine, I assured him. This isn't my first corporate battle. Of course not, he agreed. But it's the first involving your child's father. His simple observation cut through my carefully maintained composure. Jorge had driven me to school every day for 12 years, attended my graduation, and cried openly at my wedding. He'd earned the right to such observations. Yes, I acknowledged softly. That does complicate things. Just remember, he said as we pulled up to the Chen building, family is more than blood or marriage. It's who stands beside you when battle lines are drawn. Looking up at the brick building bearing my family name, I felt a surge of gratitude for the network of support surrounding me. Whatever happened in court today, I wasn't facing it alone. The workshop floor buzzed with activity as I stepped into the building. Lynn intercepted me immediately, tablet in hand. Board members are requesting updates on the Sustainable Materials Initiative before noon. Legal needs your signature on the Portland contract. The PR team has prepared talking points for any questions about your personal situation, and your father is waiting in the conference room with Sophia. I accepted the tablet she handed me, scanning the morning's agenda. Tell the board I'll distribute sustainability updates within the hour. I'll sign the Portland papers now, and I don't need PR talking points. Any personal questions will receive a simple no comment. Lynn nodded approvingly. Exactly what your father suggested. She hesitated. Also, Mr. Watkins from Tech Fusion called 3 times this morning. That was unexpected. Tech Fusion's CEO rarely involved himself in personnel matters. Did he say what it was regarding? No, but he sounded concerned. Said it was a sensitive matter requiring discretion. Interesting. I wondered if Russo's investigation had stirred something at Ethan's firm. I'll call him after my meeting with Dad, I decided. Anything else urgent? Just one thing. Lynn's professional demeanor softened slightly. The design team had this delivered for your office. She gestured to a doorway where 2 workshop staff were positioning an elegant wooden cradle beside my design station. A masterpiece of craftsmanship with gentle curves and inlaid maple leaves. They wanted you to know your son is welcome here, Lynn explained. The adjacent space has been converted for privacy when needed. The thoughtful gesture, so unlike the cold corporate environment Ethan had described at Tech Fusion, momentarily overwhelmed me. Please convey my thanks to everyone involved, I managed, blinking back unexpected tears. Pregnancy hormones, I told myself, though I knew it was more than that. Lynn squeezed my arm gently. We're all very glad to have you back, Maya. In the conference room, I found my father reviewing documents with Sophia Zhang, Chen Bespoke's chief legal counsel. At 62, with salt and pepper hair and razor-sharp intellect, Sophia had broken countless glass ceilings in corporate law before joining our family company. Perfect timing, Dad said, rising to kiss my cheek. Sophia's been analyzing Russo's findings. Morning. Maya, Sophia greeted me. How are you feeling? Ready, I replied, settling into a chair. What's our exposure if Ethan retaliates by revealing proprietary information about Chen designs? Sophia smiled thinly. Minimal. The confidentiality clauses in your postnuptial are ironclad with liquidated damages provisions. If Ethan discloses anything, he'll trigger automatic penalties that would essentially wipe out whatever remains of his financial position. And Tech Fusion? I asked. Ethan implied he has damaging information. A bluff, my father interjected, confidently. We maintain ethical firewalls between Chen and any institution where family members work. Ethan never had access to anything substantive. Sophia nodded agreement. His threats are empty. More concerning is what Russo discovered about his activities at Tech Fusion. If that information becomes public, Tech Fusion could face regulatory scrutiny, which explains why Watkins has been calling, I mused. Someone at Tech Fusion must have gotten wind of the investigation. Tread carefully there, Sophia advised. Ethan is still technically employed by Tech Fusion. Anything you discuss with Watkins could complicate matters. Understood, I said, checking my watch. I should call him before the court hearing. Is there anything else I need to know? Sophia slid a folder across the table. Elena filed our response to their emergency motion. Judge Torres is presiding. She's fair but unsympathetic to claims of financial carelessness from sophisticated parties. Perfect, I said, scanning the response brief. Elena had systematically dismantled each of Ethan's claims, emphasizing his professional background in technology and the multiple times he'd signed the renewal agreement. One more thing, my father added, his expression grave. Russo noted unusual activity on Ethan's computer last night. He accessed sensitive client files at Tech Fusion, downloaded multiple documents, then deleted the access logs. That was concerning. You think he's planning to use client information as leverage? Or simply securing his future employment options? Sophia suggested. Either way, it's problematic for him professionally. I made a note to alert Elena. What about the sustainable materials presentation for the board? Already prepared, Dad said, pushing another folder toward me. Just needs your final review before distribution. For the next hour, we worked through the materials, finalizing performance metrics and growth projections. The initiative, my pet project for the past year, had consistently outperformed expectations, providing tangible proof of my business acumen independent of Ethan or my family name. At 11 I excused myself to call Tech Fusion's CEO from the privacy of my office. Robert Watkins answered after the first ring. Mr. Watkins, Maya Chen returning your call. Maya. His tone softened. Thank you for getting back to me. I understand this is a difficult time. What can I do for you, Mr. Watkins? He cleared his throat uncomfortably. This is a delicate matter. We've become aware of some irregularities in Ethan's client accounting. Given your situation, I wanted to speak with you directly before our audit committee proceeds. So they had. Discovered Ethan's creative bookkeeping independently of Russo's investigation. Interesting. I appreciate your courtesy, I said carefully. But I'm not involved in Tech Fusion's operations, nor am I privy to Ethan's professional activities. Of course, Watkins agreed quickly. I only called because, well, to be frank, Ethan has implied that any issues with his accounts were at your direction. Something about joint management of client relationships. Anger flared hot and immediate. Of course Ethan would try to implicate me in his misdeeds. Mr. Watkins, I said, keeping my voice level, I have never had any involvement with Tech Fusion's client accounts. I have never directed Ethan or anyone else regarding client expenses or accounting. Any suggestion otherwise is categorically false. I suspected as much, he sighed. Ethan's been making increasingly concerning claims this morning. He seems unstable. Is he at the office now? No, he called in from home. Your home, I suppose. He's been placed on administrative leave pending our investigation. Administrative leave. Ethan's career at Tech Fusion was effectively over, whether he realized it yet or not. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, meaning it despite everything. Ethan's identity was inexorably tied to his professional status. Losing it would devastate him. There's one more thing, Watkins added hesitantly. Ethan mentioned he has evidence of improper coordination between Tech Fusion and Chen Bespoke, some kind of industrial espionage allegation. So that was his angle, desperate and predictable. There is no such evidence because no such coordination exists, I stated firmly. Chen Bespoke maintains strict ethical firewalls regarding family members employed at other companies. All our designs and business practices are transparent and fully documented. I believe that's the case, Watkins said, sounding relieved. Nevertheless, I felt obligated to inform you of his claim. After ending the call, I immediately phoned Elena to update her on this new development. She agreed to prepare for potential allegations during the hearing. This smacks of desperation, Elena observed. He's searching for leverage. Any leverage. Agreed. Have you been in contact with Jasper today? Briefly. He's exploring settlement options, which suggests their confidence is waning. I think they recognize the post-nuptial will likely be upheld. No settlement, I said firmly. The agreement stands as written. By 1, I had finalized the sustainable materials presentation, briefed the board, and was en route to the courthouse. With Elena. Jorge navigated through midday traffic while I reviewed our legal strategy one final time. Remember, Elena advised as we approached the imposing courthouse steps. Judge Torres appreciates calm, factual responses. No matter what. Ethan and Jasper allege, maintain your composure. Understood. I smoothed my blazer over my rounded belly, drawing strength from my son's reassuring movements within. The courtroom was mercifully private. Family court proceedings typically excluded spectators. But I still felt a wave of vulnerability as we entered. Ethan and Jasper were already seated at the respondents' table, heads bent together in urgent conversation. Ethan looked uncharacteristically disheveled, his usually immaculate appearance showing signs of strain. Elena guided me to our table, arranging our materials with meticulous precision. I focused on my breathing, conscious of maintaining optimal blood pressure for my baby's sake. At precisely 2, the bailiff called the court to order, and Judge Torres entered, a formidable Latina woman in her 60s with shrewd eyes and an air of no-nonsense efficiency. Tate versus Chen Tate, she announced, scanning the preliminary filings. Emergency motion challenging the validity of a postnuptial agreement. Mr. Collins, as you filed the motion, please proceed. Jasper rose smoothly. Thank you, Your Honor. We're seeking immediate relief from a grossly inequitable postnuptial agreement that was deceptively obtained and contains punitive provisions triggered by my client's divorce filing. Deceptively obtained? How? Judge Torres asked, peering over her reading glasses. The agreement was concealed within routine rental documents. Your Honor, Mr. Tate had no knowledge he was signing a postnuptial agreement affecting his marital rights. Judge Torres's expression remained neutral. Was the document clearly titled? Technically, yes, Your Honor, but was Mr. Tate prevented from reading the document? No, but was he denied legal counsel? He wasn't informed that legal counsel would be appropriate, Jasper countered. Judge Torres turned her attention to our table. Ms. Ramirez, your response? Elena rose with dignified confidence. Your Honor, the postnuptial agreement in question was properly executed, clearly labeled, and annually renewed. Mr. Tate, a technology professional with an MBA from Stanford, signed the agreement 3 separate times. His claim of ignorance strains credibility, particularly given his professional background in reviewing technical documents. The judge nodded thoughtfully. Mr. Tate, I have some questions for you directly. Ethan stood, straightening his tie nervously. Yes, Your Honor. You work in technology and business development, correct? Yes, Your Honor. I'm Vice President of Client Relations at Tech Fusion and co-founder of Northwest Tech Ventures. And, in that capacity, do you regularly review and sign legal and financial documents? I do, Your Honor. Do you typically sign such documents without reading them? Ethan shifted uncomfortably. Not typically, no. But in personal matters with my wife, there was a level of trust that… Please answer the question directly, Mr. Tate. Do you make a practice of signing legal documents without reading them? No. Your Honor? Yet you claim to have signed this particular document 3 separate times without knowing its contents. Ethan glanced at Jasper, who gave an almost imperceptible nod. Your Honor, my wife deliberately presented these documents at times when thorough review was difficult. Late evenings after long work days, or just before social engagements when time was limited. I stiffened at the blatant lie. Elena placed a cautioning hand on my arm, reminding me to maintain composure. Judge Torres turned to me. Ms. Chen Tate, did you intentionally prevent your husband from reviewing these documents? I rose carefully, conscious of my visible pregnancy. Absolutely. Not, Your Honor. Each signing was scheduled in advance with ample time allocated. The lease renewal meetings typically lasted 1 to 2 hours, with all documents available for examination. The judge made a note, then addressed Ethan again. Mr. Tate, your motion also claims coercion. Please elaborate. Ethan straightened, seemingly gaining confidence. Your Honor, my wife comes from a powerful family with significant influence in Seattle's business community. There was an implied threat that opposing her wishes would result in professional consequences for me. Judge Torres raised a skeptical eyebrow. Was this implied threat documented anywhere? Not in writing, no, but the pressure was clear. Ms. Chen Tate, your response? Your Honor, no such pressure was ever applied. My husband's professional success has been entirely his own achievement. Until yesterday, I had been absent from Chen Bespoke operations for 4 years, focusing instead on supporting my husband's career. The judge studied me thoughtfully. Which brings us to timing. Mr. Tate, you filed for divorce while your wife is 5 months pregnant with your child. The postnuptial agreement contains specific provisions addressing this exact scenario. Do you dispute that the timing of your filing triggered these provisions? No, Your Honor, Ethan admitted, but I wasn't aware such provisions existed when I filed. Because you didn't read the agreement, Judge Torres concluded flatly. Exactly, Your Honor, Jasper interjected, which speaks to our fundamental argument. Mr. Tate cannot be bound by terms he was unaware of due to his wife's deliberate concealment. It wasn't concealed, Your Honor, Elena countered. It was presented openly with his other rental documents. Mr. Tate chose not to read it. That's negligence, not fraud. Judge Torres reviewed the agreement once more, then looked up decisively. I'm ready to rule on this motion. Mr. Tate's claim that he was unaware of the postnuptial agreement's contents does not constitute grounds for invalidation. As a sophisticated professional with extensive experience in business matters, your failure to read a clearly labeled legal document before signing it represents negligence on your part, not fraud or coercion by your wife. Ethan's face flushed with anger as the judge continued. The agreement appears properly executed with appropriate consideration and disclosure. The triggering provision regarding pregnancy may be unusual, but it is neither unconscionable nor contrary to public policy. Therefore, I am denying your motion to invalidate the postnuptial agreement. It will remain in force during these proceedings. Jasper immediately rose. Your Honor, given this ruling, we request a stay to allow Mr. Tate time to evaluate his options regarding the divorce. Filing itself? Judge Torres shook her head. The filing has already triggered the agreement's provisions. A stay would be procedurally meaningless at this point. She gathered her papers. I'm scheduling a case management conference for next Monday to establish discovery timelines. We're adjourned. The gavel's sharp crack echoed through the courtroom as Ethan stared at me with undisguised hostility. Elena quickly gathered our materials as the judge departed. A complete victory, but it didn't feel like victory. Despite everything, watching Ethan's professional and personal life unravel brought me no joy. He was still my child's father, still the man I had once loved enough to marry. As we prepared to leave, Ethan approached, ignoring Elena's cautioning presence. You won't get away with this, he hissed, low enough that only I could hear. I know things about your father's business, things that would interest federal regulators. Ethan, I replied calmly, we both know you have nothing. Don't compound your problems with empty threats and potential slander. This isn't over, he insisted, as Jasper attempted to pull him away. You think you've won? You have no idea what I'm capable of. Actually, I do, I said softly. That's why I had the foresight, to protect myself and our son from exactly this scenario. Elena stepped between us. This conversation is over, Mr. Tate. Any further communication should go through counsel. As Ethan was led away by an increasingly frustrated Jasper, I felt a peculiar emptiness. The man I had married, or thought I had married, was entirely gone, replaced by this angry stranger hurling threats and accusations. Outside the courthouse, reporters had gathered despite our attempts at discretion. Elena skillfully guided me through them to the waiting car, deflecting questions with practiced ease. Once safely inside, I released a long, shaky breath. That went about as expected. Better than expected, Elena corrected. Judge Torres rarely rules from the bench on complex financial matters. The fact that she did speaks to the strength of our position. My phone buzzed with a text from Lily. Verdict? Postnup upheld. Ethan not taking it well, I replied simply. No surprise there. Dad's ordering sparkling cider for you. Dinner at his place. Tonight to celebrate. I put the phone away, leaning back against the comfortable leather seat. Take me back to Chen Bespoke, please, Jorge. I still have work to finish. Are you sure? Elena asked, concern evident in her voice. It's been an eventful day. I'm sure, I confirmed. The Sustainable Materials Initiative won't manage itself, and focusing on work keeps me from dwelling on... I gestured vaguely toward the courthouse behind us. Elena nodded, understanding. Very well. I'll update your father on today's proceedings and prepare for Monday's conference. As Jorge navigated away from the courthouse, I glanced back to see Ethan emerging, surrounded by reporters. Even from a distance, his body language broadcast rage and humiliation. Jorge, I said suddenly, could you drive by the apartment? I need to check something. Of course, Ms. Chen. Elena gave me a questioning look, but I merely shook my head slightly. A suspicion had formed. Ethan's uncharacteristic dishevelment, his desperate accusations, Robert Watkins' concerns about unstable behavior. Something wasn't adding up. As we approached our building, I noted unusual activity at the entrance. Building security engaged in what appeared to be a heated discussion with someone just inside the lobby. Stop here, please, I instructed Jorge. Maya, Elena cautioned. Whatever's happening, it's better to stay uninvolved. I just need to see, I insisted, lowering the window slightly. From this distance, I could now make out the scene clearly. Ethan, having somehow beaten us here, was arguing with building security while attempting to remove several large boxes from the premises. My suspicion was confirmed. Take me to Chen Bespoke now, please, Jorge. What is it? Elena asked, noting my changed demeanor. Ethan's removing items from the apartment against building policy, I explained. Let security handle it. I've already flagged our valuables with management. As we pulled away, I sent a quick text to the building manager confirming Ethan should not be permitted to remove anything beyond personal clothing and toiletries. Whatever game he was playing, whether attempting to secure valuables before asset freezing or simply acting out of spite, it would fail. The Sustainable Materials Initiative awaited my attention, and my son deserved a mother focused on the future, not dwelling on a marriage that had revealed itself to be built on illusion. Ethan's final threat echoed in my mind as Jorge accelerated smoothly toward Chen Bespoke. You have no idea what I'm capable of. Perhaps not. But whatever came next, I would be ready. The next 3 days passed in relative calm, perhaps too calm, given Ethan's volatile parting words. I divided my time between Chen Bespoke, where the Sustainable Materials Initiative demanded careful management during supply chain fluctuations, and preparation for Monday's case management conference. On Friday evening, Lily accompanied me to the apartment to collect additional clothing and personal items. Building security reported that Ethan had not returned since his failed attempt to remove property, though his access had not been revoked. "You're sure you don't want to stay at Dad's?" Lily asked as we sorted through my closet. "Or my place? This apartment feels—" She wrinkled her nose. "Tainted somehow." "It's still my home," I replied, selecting maternity wear appropriate for next week's meetings. "I won't be driven out, especially not before the court formally addresses residents' rights." Lily sighed, folding a cashmere sweater with uncharacteristic precision. "You're stubborn, you know that? Dad says it's the Cheney in you," says the man who once refused to sell a dining table despite 3 cracks and a termite infestation. I countered with a smile. "Exactly," she laughed. "Pig-headed determination runs in our blood." She paused, expression turning serious. "But, seriously, Maya, Ethan's behaving erratically. Robert Watkins called Dad again today. Apparently, Ethan tried to access Tech Fusion's secure servers remotely after his credentials were suspended. That was concerning." "Did he succeed?" "No, but the attempt itself triggered security protocols. Watkins is considering legal action." I absorbed this information, mentally adding it to the growing catalog of Ethan's increasingly desperate maneuvers. First, the divorce during pregnancy, then the affair with Jasper, followed by attempts to remove assets, and now potential corporate espionage. The pattern suggested escalating recklessness. "I'll update Elena," I decided, sending a quick text to our attorney. "But I'm still staying here tonight. The building has 24-hour security and I've changed all the locks." Lily looked unconvinced but didn't argue further. After helping me pack essentials, she reluctantly departed with promises to check in hourly, her concern touching, if somewhat suffocating. Alone in the apartment, I moved through the familiar rooms that now felt subtly different, spaces once shared that would soon be divided, memories stored in furniture and artwork soon to be liquidated or separated. In the nursery, I traced my fingers over the half-finished mural Ethan had started painting before his interest in impending fatherhood had mysteriously waned. A forest, scene with gentle animals, now abandoned like so many of his projects. My phone buzzed with an incoming call from an unknown number. Normally, I'd let such calls go to voicemail, but something, intuition perhaps, prompted me to answer. "Chutki?" "Chen?" I said cautiously. "Ms. Chen Tate, this is Detective Parker, Seattle Police Department Financial Crimes Unit." The woman's voice was professional, direct. "Do you have a moment to answer some questions about your husband, Ethan Tate?" My pulse quickened. "May I ask what this is regarding?" "We're investigating potentially unauthorized access to secure financial systems at Tech Fusion. Mr. Tate's supervisor has reported suspicious activity, so Watkins had escalated the matter to law enforcement already." "Interesting. I'm happy to assist, Detective, but I should note that I'm currently in divorce proceedings with my husband and have limited knowledge of his professional activities." "Understood," Detective Parker replied. "Nevertheless, your perspective could be valuable. Would tomorrow morning work for a brief interview at your convenience?" We arranged to meet at Chen Bespoke at 10 Coins the following morning. After ending the call, I immediately contacted Elena to inform her of this new development. "Police involvement changes things," she observed. "If Ethan is under criminal investigation, it could actually simplify our divorce proceedings. Courts take a dim view of parties engaged in financial misconduct." "That's assuming he's actually guilty of something," I pointed out. "So far, it's just suspicious behavior." "True, but either way, it adds pressure on him to settle according to the post-nuptial terms rather than prolonging litigation while under scrutiny." After we disconnected, I found myself standing before the large windows overlooking the city, one hand resting on my active baby bump. My son had been particularly energetic today, as if sensing the storm surrounding his impending arrival. "Don't worry," I whispered to him. "Whatever happens, I'll make sure you're safe and secure." The peacefulness of the moment was shattered by the harsh buzz of the apartment's intercom. The building concierge's voice came through clearly. "Ms. Chen Tate, I apologize for the interruption, but Mr. Tate is in the lobby insisting on access to the apartment. He appears agitated. Would you like me to have security escort him out?" I considered my options quickly. Denying Ethan access could escalate his already volatile state, while allowing him entry posed its own risks. However, with building security, aware of the situation and my family on high alert, a controlled confrontation might be preferable to prolonging the inevitable. "You can send him up, Anthony," I decided, "but please have security remain on standby." "Of course, Ms. Chen Tate. They'll be right outside if needed." I moved to the kitchen, positioning myself with the marble island between me and the entry. Within minutes, I heard the elevator doors open, followed by Ethan's uneven footsteps in the foyer. He appeared in the doorway looking considerably worse than he had in court. Unshaven, shirt wrinkled, eyes bloodshot. The controlled, polished tech executive had been replaced by someone I barely recognized. "Ethan," I acknowledged calmly. "Anthony mentioned you were agitated." "Agitated?" He gave a harsh laugh, moving into the kitchen but stopping when he noticed my protective positioning behind the island. "That's one word for it. Betrayed might be another. Destroyed works too. What do you want, Ethan?" Elena was clear that all communication should go through counsel. "Elena Ramirez." He spat the name like a curse. "Your father's attack dog." He paced the kitchen perimeter, running a hand through his disheveled hair. "Watkins suspended me, did. You know that? Pending investigation into financial irregularities. Your father's doing, I assume." "My father has no influence over Tech Fusion's internal procedures," I corrected him. "If you're being investigated, it's because your actions warranted scrutiny." Ethan's expression darkened. "Always so calm, so reasonable. That's your act, isn't it? Quiet little Maya, supportive wife who never complained, never questioned, while secretly plotting and manipulating behind the scenes." "There was no plot, Ethan." I maintained my position behind the island, one hand resting protectively on my belly. "Only protection against exactly the scenario you created. Now, what is it you want? I assume you didn't come here just to accuse me of conspiracies." He stopped pacing abruptly. "I want what's mine, half the assets, as agreed when we married. Not this financial execution your postnuptial dictates." "The agreement you signed is legally binding," I reminded him. "Judge Torres was quite clear on that point." "Because I didn't read the fine print," he exploded, slamming his hand on the counter. "One mistake, one oversight, and you're using it to take everything." "Not everything," I corrected him quietly. "Only what's rightfully mine and our son's. You'll retain exactly what you brought into the marriage, adjusted for reasonable growth." "Reasonable?" He laughed bitterly. $100,000 becomes what? Maybe $125,000, while you walk away with over $1 million? $1.2 million, I clarified. "And yes, that's the agreement you signed. 3 times. Ethan moved toward one of the kitchen drawers, and I tensed, suddenly alert to potential danger. But he merely withdrew a small stack of papers, tossing it onto the island between us. "Here's my counteroffer," he stated flatly. "Tear up the postnup, standard 50-50 division, joint custody, and I don't release this information to the SEC and business press." I glanced at the documents without touching them, printouts of various Chen bespoke transactions, including several related to the Sustainable Materials Initiative. "These are confidential corporate documents," I observed, my voice hardening. "Removing them from Tech Fusion constitutes corporate espionage at minimum, possibly theft of trade secrets." "Call it what you want," he shrugged with false nonchalance. "But these show clear patterns of material sourcing violations, sustainability certifications that don't match the actual suppliers, coincidental timing on certain bids, too precise, to be accidental. I studied the papers more carefully now, immediately recognizing what he was attempting to present as evidence. These are standard business transactions, Ethan. Nothing illegal or improper about them. A good investigative reporter could make them look suspicious, he countered. Enough to trigger an investigation, tank Chen's stock, and create very public problems for your father's company. Your company now too, I suppose. So this was his play. Desperate blackmail backed by manufactured evidence. I considered my options, knowing that engaging with his threat legitimized it, while dismissing it outright might provoke him further. You should know, I said carefully, that Detective Parker from SPD Financial Crimes called me earlier. They're investigating unauthorized access to Tech Fusion's systems. Given the timing and those documents in front of you, I imagine you'll be hearing from her soon as well. The blood drained from Ethan's face. You're bluffing. We're meeting tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. I replied calmly. Feel free to verify with the department. Ethan's confident demeanor crumbled visibly. Maya, listen to me. I'm not the villain here. I made mistakes, yes, but this divorce, it wasn't about hurting you. It was about being honest before our son arrives. Wouldn't you rather he grow up with separated parents who respect each other than together in a loveless marriage? The sudden pivot to reasonable concern might have been convincing had I not witnessed his escalating desperation over the past week. Ethan, I said softly, if you truly cared about our son's well-being, you wouldn't be attempting to blackmail his mother with fabricated evidence while under criminal investigation. You'd be focused on building a stable co-parenting relationship and securing your own future. His expression hardened again. So that's it? No negotiation? No compromise? The post-nuptial agreement already represents the compromise, I explained. You retain your premarital assets plus reasonable growth. Child support will be fair, and custody arrangements will prioritize our son's needs. That's the best outcome available now. Ethan stared at me for a long moment, something unreadable shifting in his eyes. Then, without warning, he swept the documents off the counter in a sudden burst of rage. This isn't over, he hissed, the same threat he'd made outside the courtroom. You think you've won, but I'll find a way. There's always a way. He moved toward me suddenly, and I instinctively backed away, one hand protective over my belly. Seeing my reaction, he stopped, a flash of shame crossing his features. I wouldn't, he began, then stopped. I'm not that person, Maya. Whatever you think of me now. Then be better than this, I urged quietly. Accept the agreement, focus on building your future, and be the father our son deserves. For a moment, just a moment, I glimpsed the man I'd thought I'd married, vulnerable, uncertain, capable of growth. Then his expression hardened once more. I'll see myself out, he said stiffly, gathering the scattered documents. Tell your detective friend I'll be available if she has questions. After he left, I released a shaky breath I hadn't realized I was holding. The confrontation had been intense, but ultimately productive. Ethan now understood that his attempted blackmail had only worsened his position, and the involvement of law enforcement had clearly rattled him. I called building security to confirm Ethan had left the premises, then texted Elena a brief summary of the encounter. Her response was immediate. Save any surveillance footage. Document everything. We'll discuss further steps tomorrow. Sleep proved elusive that night, my mind replaying the confrontation while my son maintained his seemingly nocturnal exercise routine. By morning, I had made a decision, one that balanced justice with practicality and, most importantly, served our son's long-term interests. Detective Parker arrived precisely at 10 the following morning, a compact woman with intelligent eyes and efficient movements. After reviewing what I knew of Ethan's activities at Tech Fusion, little, and his recent behavior, concerning, she thanked me for my time. One more question, Ms. Chen, she said as she gathered her notes. Given your husband's increasingly erratic behavior, Have you considered a restraining order? The suggestion gave me pause. Is that something you'd recommend based on your professional experience? Detective Parker chose her words carefully. In financial crime cases, we often see escalation when the subject feels cornered. Mr. Tate has lost his professional standing, faces divorce under unfavorable terms, and is now under criminal investigation. That's significant pressure on someone unaccustomed to failure. I'll discuss it with my attorney, I promised. Thank you for the suggestion. After she departed, I called an emergency meeting with Elena, my father, and Sophia in the Chen Bespoke conference room. Together, we formulated a multifaceted approach to resolve the Ethan situation definitively. By Monday morning, our strategy was ready. When Ethan and Jasper arrived for the case management conference, Elena immediately requested a private meeting in one of the courthouse consultation rooms before we proceeded. Before we begin, Elena started once we were all seated, my client would like to propose a modified settlement. Jasper's eyebrows rose in surprise, while Ethan looked instantly suspicious. What kind of modification? He asked warily. I leaned forward slightly. One that potentially benefits everyone at this table. For the next 20 minutes, I outlined our proposal. The postnuptial agreement would remain in force regarding asset division, but with 3 significant modifications. First, Ethan would receive a structured settlement providing additional liquidity, $100,000 beyond his premarital assets, payable over 5 years, conditional on his full cooperation with Tech Fusion's internal investigation and any law enforcement inquiries. Second, he would retain visitation rights with our son under supervised conditions for the first year, transitioning to standard arrangements thereafter, assuming appropriate behavior. Third, Chen Bespoke would provide a professional reference limited to verifying his creative contributions to certain design projects without mentioning the circumstances of our separation once all legal matters were resolved. In exchange, Ethan would sign comprehensive confidentiality and non-disparagement agreements covering both our marriage and any knowledge of Chen business practices. Why would you offer this? Jasper asked, suspiciously. You've won at every turn. The postnup is valid. Ethan's professional situation is precarious at best, and you hold all the leverage. Because, I replied simply, our son deserves a father with the opportunity to rebuild his life, not one destroyed by his own worst impulses. Ethan studied me intently, clearly searching for hidden motivations. And if I refuse? Then we proceed. As originally outlined in the postnuptial agreement, Elena answered. Additionally, Chen Bespoke will cooperate fully with any law enforcement investigations into potential corporate espionage or attempted blackmail. The threat was clear but professionally delivered. Ethan's attempt to use confidential documents as leverage had backfired spectacularly. Jasper requested time to confer privately with his client. When they returned 20 minutes later, Ethan's demeanor had changed subtly. Less desperate, more resigned. We accept your terms, Jasper stated professionally, with the understanding that all current investigations will be resolved as part of this agreement. Chen Bespoke has no control over law enforcement actions, Elena clarified. But we will convey to Tech Fusion that we consider any civil matters between them and Mr. Tate resolved by this agreement. Documents were drafted and signed over the next 2 hours, transforming what could have been months of bitter litigation into a structured resolution. When complete, Jasper departed to file the necessary paperwork, leaving Ethan and me momentarily alone in the consultation room. Why? He asked quietly after a long silence. After everything, why offer me any lifeline at all? I rested both hands on my rounded belly, feeling our son's movements. Because rage and retribution are poor foundations for parenting, and because I meant what I said, he deserves a father capable of redemption. I didn't deserve you, he said after a moment, a rare glimpse of genuine self-awareness. I never did. Perhaps not, I acknowledged. But that's irrelevant now. What matters is what you do next, whether you become someone our son can respect. He nodded slowly. I'll try. That's all I can promise right now. It's enough. To start with, I replied, gathering my belongings. As I moved toward the door, I paused. The nursery mural. The one you started painting before everything. It was beautiful. He would have loved it. Something like grief flickered across his face. Maybe someday I can finish one for him, in whatever place becomes my home. Maybe, I agreed softly. Goodbye, Ethan. The next 4 months passed in a blur of activity. My son's impending arrival accelerated our production timelines at Chen Bespoke, with the Sustainable Materials Initiative expanding into 3 new product lines. Each week brought new challenges and triumphs as I balanced my growing body with growing professional responsibilities. True to his word, Ethan maintained a respectful distance, completing the required therapy sessions, cooperating with Tech Fusion's investigation, and occasionally sending inquiries about my health through Elena. The criminal investigation ultimately resulted in a deferred prosecution agreement rather than formal charges, allowing him to begin rebuilding his life, albeit in drastically changed circumstances. As my due date approached, Lynn coordinated a modified work schedule that allowed me to continue directing our design team remotely. My father, initially resistant to technological solutions, soon embraced video conferencing with characteristic Chen determination. You should be resting, he insisted during our weekly design review, his face serious on my tablet screen. I am resting, I replied, gesturing to my living room sofa where I was comfortably propped with pillows. Besides, the Westlake project needs final approval before we commit to materials. He grumbled good-naturedly, but his pride was evident as we reviewed the innovative designs my team had developed under my direction, sustainable luxury furniture that maintained Chen quality while pioneering new ecological standards. Then, 3 weeks before my due date, at our regular Monday morning meeting, Lynn entered with an unexpected visitor request. Ethan Tate is here to see you, she announced, her tone carefully neutral. He says it's important but not urgent. I can send him. Away, I hesitated, surprised by the unscheduled visit. Our last communication had been through attorneys 2 weeks prior, finalizing the nursery equipment he was permitted to provide. No, it's all right, I decided. Send him in. Lynn nodded, her expression making it clear that security was nearby if needed. Moments later, Ethan entered my office, clean-shaven, modestly dressed, looking both nervous and determined. He carried a large, flat package wrapped in brown paper. Maya, he said with a slight nod. Thank you for seeing me. I know this is unexpected. You look well, I observed, and it was true. The desperate, disheveled man from our apartment confrontation had been replaced by someone calmer, more centered. I am, he confirmed. 6 weeks sober. The counseling is helping. He gestured to the package. I wanted to give you this in person. It's for him. Curious, I accepted the package and carefully unwrapped it. Inside was a hand-painted wooden sign, beautifully crafted with intricate forest animals matching the half-finished nursery mural. Oliver's adventure was painted in elegant script across the top, surrounded by woodland creatures. You remembered the name we discussed, I said softly, tracing the letters. Of course. A flicker of the old Ethan showed in his genuine smile. I've been taking a woodworking class, not exactly Chen quality, but it's beautiful, I interrupted. Sincerely. He'll love it. Thank you. Ethan's expression grew serious. There's something else. I didn't just come to deliver this. He took a deep breath. I heard about the opening, the junior designer position. I stilled, understanding immediately what he meant. Chen Bespoke had recently posted a job opening for a junior designer specializing in children's furniture. Entry-level, modest pay, primarily implementation rather than creative direction. I'd like to apply, he continued when I didn't immediately respond. Formally, properly through HR. No special treatment. I know my design background is limited to hobbyist level, but I'm willing to start at the bottom, to learn, to earn my place. I studied him carefully. Why Chen Bespoke? With your tech background, there must be other opportunities, even with Tech Fusion's reference limitations. Because I want our son to see me doing something meaningful, he answered simply. Something that builds rather than just monetizes. And because, he hesitated, because I was happiest when I was creating things, before the startup world convinced me that status and money were more important than craft. It was perhaps the most honest thing Ethan had ever said to me. You realize, I said carefully, that if you applied and were accepted, you would be starting at the absolute bottom. Minimum wage, probationary period, no special treatment, and you would report through the standard chain of command, which ultimately leads to me. He nodded. I understand. I'm not asking for favors, Maya. Just a chance to prove myself through actual work, not promises. I considered his request, weighing the complex emotions it stirred. There would be challenges, office gossip, awkward moments, inevitable tensions when our personal history collided with professional interactions. Yet, there would also be benefits for our son, seeing his father engaged in meaningful work, learning a craft that might one day become a legacy of his own. Submit your application through proper channels, I finally said. I won't interfere either way. If HR and the design director find your skills adequate for an entry position, you'll be considered. Like any other candidate, relief washed over his face. That's all I'm asking. Thank you. As he turned to leave, I added, Ethan, be certain this is what you want. Working at Chen Bespoke means becoming part of something larger than yourself. We expect dedication to craft, above all else. I know, he replied with unexpected humility. That's exactly why I want to try. After he left, I sat quietly, reflecting on the strange journey that had brought us to this point. When Ethan had asked for a divorce 6 months ago, I could never have imagined this outcome. Him applying for an entry-level position at my family's company. Me preparing to raise our child from a position of strength rather than desperation. Life's ironies were not lost on me. 2 weeks later, Oliver William Chen made his entrance into the world. 8 pounds, 2 ounces of determined personality with my eyes and Ethan's chin. My father, Lily, and Sophia crowded my hospital room with flowers, handcrafted wooden toys, and a tiny Chen Bespoke branded onesie. He's perfect, Lily declared, cradling her nephew with unexpected expertise. A true Chen man already. With the Tate determination, I added quietly, watching my son's tiny fist grasp Lily's finger with surprising strength. Ethan had sent a beautiful handmade mobile and a small wooden rattle, but respectfully waited until we returned home before requesting to visit. When he came, bearing a gentle smile and nervous energy, the awkwardness I'd expected gave way to something softer as he held his son for the first time. He has your focus, Ethan observed as Oliver studied his face with intense concentration. Already sizing up the world, I watched them together. This man who had once broken my heart now completely captivated by the tiny human we'd created. Whatever our past, whatever complications lay ahead, this moment contained its own perfect truth. HR called, Ethan said. Eventually, as Oliver dozed in his arms, I got the job. Junior designer, children's line, starting next month. He looked up, his expression a mix of pride and humility. I'll be working under Ming in the production department. Ming is excellent, I replied neutrally. One of our best implementation specialists. You'll learn a lot from her. Minimum wage with potential review after 6 months, he added with a self-deprecating smile. Quite a step down from tech executive. It's honest work, I said simply. And somehow, in that moment, the strange symmetry of our situation felt right. Not as punishment or revenge, but as a recalibration. Ethan would now earn his place in our son's life through consistent effort, rather than entitled demands, beginning a journey measured in craftsmanship rather than stock options. 6 months later, on a bright autumn morning, I carried Oliver through the Chen Bespoke workshop, introducing him to the sights, sounds, and smells that would become familiar companions throughout his childhood. At 7 months old, he was already showing signs of the Chen curiosity, his eyes tracking the movements of artisans as they worked with quiet precision. My father walked beside us, pointing out different wood types and techniques to his grandson, with the same patience he'd once shown me. His semi-retirement had become even more semi since Oliver's birth, with new designs and prototypes appearing regularly in his home workshop. "He has your touch for grain patterns," Dad observed as Oliver's tiny fingers traced the whorls in a piece of maple. "You can feel life in the woods." As we rounded the corner toward the children's furniture department, I saw Ethan hunched over a workbench, carefully sanding the edges of a small chair. Unlike the designers who created concepts and blueprints, junior production staff like Ethan implemented those designs, measuring, cutting, sanding, finishing. It was physical, demanding work that left sawdust in your clothes and calluses on your hands. 6 months into his new career, the transformation was remarkable. The sleek tech executive with perfectly styled hair and designer clothes had been replaced by a craftsman in work clothes, his forearms stronger, his focus absolute as he worked the wood with growing confidence. Ming, his supervisor, stood nearby examining his work. "The radius needs to be consistent, Tate. Children notice these things even if parents don't. Try again." Without complaint, Ethan began standing the curve, his movements more precise this time. The humility in his acceptance of criticism was perhaps the most profound change, the former startup star now grateful for the chance to learn from true masters of craft. He hadn't noticed us yet, absorbed in the challenge before him. Oliver, however, recognized his father immediately, letting out an excited squeal that echoed through the workshop. Ethan looked up, his face lighting with genuine joy. He quickly set aside his tools and wiped his hands on his apron before approaching, careful to maintain professional decorum in the workplace. "Mr. Chen," he nodded respectfully to my father, then smiled at me. "Maya." His voice softened as he reached for Oliver. "Hey, buddy, you've come to inspect my work?" Oliver babbled happily, reaching for his father's beard, a new addition that suited this version of Ethan surprisingly well. "His first workshop tour?" I explained. Dad thought it was time. "Starting him early," my father said with no small amount of pride. "The 7th generation of Chen craftsmanship." Ming approached, clipboard in hand. "Ms. Chen, we've finished the prototype for the adjustable crib design you requested. Would you like to review it now?" "Yes. Thank you, Ming." I handed over to my father. "I'll just be a moment." As Ming led me to the prototype area, we passed by Ethan's workstation. Unlike most junior staff who had only basic tools, his space contained several hand-carved implements and a small photo of Oliver propped against his toolbox. "How is he progressing?" I asked quietly. Ming, never one to mince words, considered the question carefully. "Better than expected. His technical skills were rudimentary when he started, but he works harder than anyone else, stays late to practice, asks smart questions." She shrugged. The design sensibility was always there. Now he's gaining the hands-on skills to execute it. I nodded, unsurprised. Determination had never been Ethan's problem, only the direction in which he applied it. After reviewing the crib, prototype and suggesting minor modifications, I returned to find my father and Ethan showing Oliver different wood samples, the baby's eyes wide with fascination as he patted a piece of polished cherry. "We're creating a monster," I observed with a smile. "He'll be demanding his own workbench before he can walk." I've already started designing one, my father admitted sheepishly. Just a small one with safety features. Of course you have, I laughed, taking Oliver back into my arms. Ethan checked his watch reluctantly. I should get back to work. Ming wants those chairs completed by end of the day. As he turned to leave, Oliver reached out, grabbing his father's calloused finger with surprising strength. He knows quality when he sees it, my father observed quietly. Looking at them together, my son holding tightly to his father's hand, Ethan's expression a mix of pride and wonder, I felt a sense of completion that had nothing to do with revenge or power dynamics. This strange journey had brought us to a place I could never have anticipated, yet somehow felt right. Our marriage had failed, but something new was being built in its place. Something sturdier, more authentic, constructed with the same care that went into every piece of furniture bearing the Chen name. I have a department meeting, I said, checking my watch. Dad, could you take Oliver to Lynn? She's threatening to quit if she doesn't get her daily baby time. With pleasure, he replied, taking his grandson. We'll stop by the finishing department. 2. Martinez has a new non-toxic sealant he wants to show off. As they departed, Ethan lingered for a moment. I never properly thanked you, he said quietly. For what? For this chance. For not destroying me when you could have. He gestured around the workshop. I earn minimum wage. I have sawdust permanently embedded in my skin. And I've never been happier. That wasn't my goal, I admitted. Happiness for you, I mean. I know. He nodded. But sometimes justice and healing look remarkably similar from the other side. He smiled ruefully. I should get back to those chairs before Ming has me sanding tabletops for the next month. As Ethan returned to his workbench and I headed toward the executive offices, I reflected on how differently things had turned out from what either of us had imagined that night he asked for divorce. The man who had left me when I was pregnant now worked for me at minimum wage, not as punishment, but as reconstruction. And somewhere in that journey, we'd both found something neither of us expected. Not the partnership we'd once vowed, but a different kind of bond forged through crisis and cemented by our son. Not perfect, not without complications, but honest in a way our marriage had never been. As I settled into my office to review the quarter's designs, I could see the workshop, floor through my window, artisans bent over their stations, each focused on creating something beautiful and lasting from raw materials. Among them, Ethan worked steadily, his movements increasingly fluid as he shaped wood into forms that would outlast our conflicts and complications. Oliver would grow up watching his father build things with his hands, not the ephemeral digital, products of his previous career, but tangible objects created with care and precision. He would see his mother leading with the quiet strength that had sustained generations of Chens. He would inherit not the fractured remains of a failed marriage, but the solid foundation of two people who had found their separate paths to integrity, and that, I realized as I turned to my work, was the most unexpected victory of all. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them. Now, and hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.